Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Aligned Wellness Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Torrie Thompson, and I'm so excited to be here today. We are going to talk about blood sugar regulation, and things that may cause blood sugar issues that aren't food. People always think blood sugar dysregulation, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, food. However, there are so many other causes that actually aren't food. You can end up with type 2 diabetes and have a perfect diet. So we're going to talk about what these causes are, what you can do to hack it, and really get into all of the tests you can run to make sure that you do not become one of these statistics. Right now, 1 in every 3 Americans is pre-diabetic, and diabetes being one of the most common chronic diseases in America, really across the globe. So when you're looking at, insulin resistance, prediabetes, diabetes, this person usually wakes up, drinks coffee, will do okay, has these afternoon crashes, craving sugar. Sometimes it's right, 2 to 3 o'clock. Other times it's that, right after dinner window, but we're often having these intense sugar cravings. And really, this is a sign of metabolic dysfunction. The good news is it's fixable. If it's someone that is type 2 diabetes, this is something that is fixable. If it's insulin resistance, if it's hypoglycemia, generally lifestyle modifications, whether it's diet, whether it's your gut, whether it's your stress, we can get these to get back into balance. And from there, we're able to heal our metabolic system and get our body back in check. So when we're talking about our metabolism and our metabolic health, we have to understand what happens when we eat. So if you eat a carb is going to be broken down to sugar. So we ingest this carb, the body breaks it down. So you have sweet potato. The body breaks it down and turns it into glucose. Once we have glucose in the blood, the body will actually release insulin from the pancreas. And that is basically the key that's going to open the cells to get the sugar into the cells to create the energy to do our jobs that are needed in the cells. However, when we have too much sugar, what the body does is it's going to get stored as glycogen, basically a reserve. And glycogen is going to be stored in the liver, it's going to be stored in the muscles, and then it's going to be stored as fat if there's already too much glycogen stored in the liver and the muscles. So that's one of the reasons muscle is so foundational. We have to have it. However, we're going to get into that later. So we're going to talk about all of the hormones involved in our blood sugar regulation. So we talk about insulin. Insulin is going to be secreted by the beta cells of the pancreas, and it's going to act like a key to unlock the cell to get the blood sugar or the sugar into the cell itself to do its jobs. We have glucagon, which is going to be released when blood sugar drops. So from breakfast to lunch, your blood sugar may drop a little bit. So glucagon is going to release some of the stored sugar for fuel so that you never get to where your blood sugar is dropping. We have this storage, glucagon there to help basically, use it as a counterbalance to insulin. We have cortisol that's very much involved in blood sugar, and cortisol is important because it's a stress response. So if you think back to when we were being, chased by a bear in our primitive days, if you're being chased by a bear or a threat, your body's going to need fuel to survive. So what it will do is when cortisol gets raised, the body will actually dump a bunch of glucose, will actually raise your blood sugar so that you have adequate amounts of fuel to run from the bear. Where the problem lies is when we get stuck in a chronic stress state, our blood sugar dysregulation becomes a chronic thing. We end up with a lot of blood sugar imbalances. Our thyroid hormones, when the thyroid hormones dip, people with sluggish thyroid, we have poor insulin signaling. Our estrogen and progesterone. So our estrogen, if you have adequate amounts of estrogen, it's actually going to improve the insulin sensitivity. So it's going to help insulin respond better to the glucose in the blood. And then progesterone is going to actually kind of bring down insulin sensitivity, especially in the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle. And then leptin, this is secreted by fat cells, and it's going to tell your brain that you're full. And leptin is our regulator, right? It tells the brain that we've had enough, stop eating. But what happens is when we have, stress, poor sleep, we have insulin resistance, what happens is our leptin basically will not fire, and we will get where we are never full. Your brain doesn't ever get that signal that there's, nope, we're done, we've had enough. So I've alluded to insulin resistance a few times. So what exactly is that? Insulin resistance is basically the kind of the stair to type 2 diabetes. This is the first phase. So what happens is when someone eats a diet that has got a lot of sugar, whether it's carbs or actual processed sugar, and their blood glucose is high all the time, your body has to dump insulin to try to bring your blood sugar down. And so what it will do is it's just going to keep pushing insulin out because your blood sugar can't stay high for too long or else it becomes problematic. So we keep putting out our insulin, and essentially it becomes like the boy who cried wolf. Eventually the body goes, oh my gosh, we can't keep doing this. And so you get where the insulin receptors are essentially, burnt out or fatigued. So essentially what happens is you've got your blood sugars quote unquote normal, right? Because the insulin is so high, but it's able to keep the blood sugar down. And then eventually you get to where that can't sustain. And that's where type 2 diabetes normally kicks in. So, we often have this in blood work. It's very hard to spot because often we're just looking at hemoglobin A1C and glucose, but because the insulin is up to bring the blood sugar down, often your blood sugar looks fine. You're going to want to look at actually fasting insulin to see, is fasting insulin too high? And that's what's keeping my hemoglobin A1C good or my blood glucose. So some really early symptoms of insulin resistance are fatigue after meals. You eat and you feel like you need to go take a nap. Weight gain, especially around the belly. You can't seem to lose it. Brain fog, constant hunger. In women, we see a lot of PCOS, right? Polycystic ovarian syndrome. We start seeing hormone imbalances, very much tied to insulin resistance. And then something that's a really interesting sign is dark skin patches. So you'll see people's knuckles will be darker. You'll see it around basically like some people's elbows, some people's knees, but the skin will actually be darker. That is a great sign that someone is on their way to insulin resistance. So what will cause this, right? So we talked about a high glycemic diet. That's processed sugar, that's high sugar, even natural sugar, that's high carbs. Pair that with a sedentary lifestyle, not a lot of muscle, not a lot of, metabolic activity in the body. Chronic stress can do it, right? If you're chronically stressed, your body is going to keep your blood sugar higher, even if your diet is perfect. Environmental toxins can do this as well. Then we have poor sleep, and this is generally night after night after night of poor sleep. A lot of people will notice this. You have a bad night of sleep, and then the next day you are starving. Nothing seems to make it feel better. You are just so hungry and you could eat everything. It's usually the leptin. But again, you do that over and over, and it can be problematic, lead to insulin resistance, inflammation, and then also you have kind of the undertraining, not very active sedentary lifestyle, but you also have overtraining. So if someone is already kind of stressed, or they do a training or a workout that is too intense for their physical activity level, what will happen is your body it's not in good enough shape to do that. And so it's very stressful on it, and your body's going to release a ton of glucose to have enough fuel to do that workout, very similar to, being chased by a bear or some stressful situation. So if insulin resistance is left without being, worked on, without being reversed, what do we see? We see that turning into type 2 diabetes. We see that turning into cardiovascular disease. Now we have a lot of research looking at Alzheimer's disease and its tie to insulin resistance and its ties to type 2 diabetes. They're now calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes because of the blood sugar imbalances. We're seeing it cause infertility because of the hormone imbalances, and then also fatty liver disease. The good news is insulin resistance is reversible. It's just altering your lifestyle, and often it's not one thing. It's often getting to be more active, but not too active, changing your diet, lowering your stress, getting better sleep. It's multiple things that generally got us there, but I would say diet is the first place to look, really pulling back on your carb intake, on your processed sugar intake, and then, increasing your protein, increasing your fat intake to offset that. So on the other side, that's high blood sugar. We often see people dealing with hypoglycemia. This is when people are hangry. So how often do you hear someone and they're like, if I don't eat, I get hangry. I get so mad. I get so agitated. That's not a great sign either. That means that your blood sugar is dropping too low. And when your blood sugar drops too low, the body freaks out, right? You have to have a decent amount of sugar that the body can use as fuel. So symptoms of hypoglycemia are shakiness, anxiety, irritability, that hangry feeling, headaches, waking up at 2 to 3 a.m. and you're wired, craving sugar, craving caffeine, or needing caffeine to get your day going. So what often causes this is high carb meals, eating something that does not balance with fat and protein. It's straight glucose, and then you get very high and then it bottoms out. Skipping meals or fasting, especially for someone that's under stress or they're not metabolically super healthy, going too long without eating is very stressful on the body. Caffeine on an empty stomach can cause this, over exercising, and then weak adrenal glands. Someone that's in that adrenal fatigue stage. One way to really look at this is a lot of times people have no idea that their blood sugar is dropping. They might feel hangry, but now that we have CGMs, continuous glucose monitors, you can wear that on the back of your arm, and it's a very cool way to see, is your glucose dropping too low? A lot of people, it actually drops in the night. It's that long window without eating. So it's a very helpful tool to see, are you dropping? Is your blood sugar staying, it's never getting too high, but it's getting too low. So if we can, see where your blood sugar is in a 24-hour period, it allows you to go, okay, I notice my blood sugar is dropping at night, so I need to eat something that's higher in protein, higher in fat before I go to bed, so I have enough fuel to get me through the night. Or I notice that after I exercise, my blood sugar is getting high and then it's getting very low. So I need to eat something mid-exercise to make sure that my blood sugar doesn't get too low. But you can use these tools to make sure that your blood sugar is staying stable 24 hours a day. So we talked about diet, right? Of course, not having a great diet, having an ultra-processed, high sugar, high carb diet is one way to get insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, even hypoglycemia. But what are some non-diet causes of blood sugar dysregulation? The first, and I think most people here in America can relate to this on some extent, is chronic stress. We live in a world where we are running a million miles an hour. We're often stressed about family, work, finances, getting the kids places, and it takes a toll on our body. And so when we are chronically stressed out, the body will raise our blood sugar to help fuel us for whatever that emergency is. But when we get chronic, we are chronically stressed, our blood sugar just stays very high. I see a lot of entrepreneurs that end up with either insulin resistance, but a lot of them type 2 diabetes. Their diet's perfect. It's just their stress load. Their stress load is keeping their blood sugar high and their body can't sustain it. So we have to, one, worry about getting our chronic stress down, but how does it essentially... So the other interesting thing about high stress is that cortisol actually breaks down protein and will turn it into glucose. So not only is your body taking the carbs and turning it to glucose, protein that is not classically turned into glucose or sugar is now broken down. So now pretty much everything is spiking your blood sugar when it shouldn't be, even if you're not eating carbs. I've seen people that are on the carnivore diet and their blood sugar spiking after eating steak, which shouldn't do that. So again, eventually that chronic high stress is going to lead to insulin resistance. Leave that too long, and then it turns into type 2 diabetes. The cells really stop signaling or stop listening to the insulin signals, and then that's when type 2 diabetes kicks in. So this is really that person that eats well, but they are high stress and they are often going to be overcaffeinated. They're going to have belly fat. Their cortisol is going to be off the charts, or if after too long, it's going to be very low. But again, chronic stress is something that generally we're not going to get to zero, but we can teach our bodies how to manage it. Things like breath work, getting outside every day, going on a walk, not adding excessive strenuous activities on top of a stressed body. You shouldn't be doing crazy intense workouts if you're super stressed. That's more wanting to do yoga, wanting to go on walks. So finding ways to, get your stress down, working on your vagus nerve, breath work, yoga, meditation, spending time with family, finding ways to get your stress to lower. The next is toxins. This is really one of my favorite things, is looking at how these toxins affect the blood sugar. And so we look at things like plastics, BPA, we've got phthalates, pesticides, heavy metals. They all can disrupt insulin signaling. And so if the signaling gets off, again, blood sugar can get high, leading to problems. And they all can affect the beta cell function of the pancreas. They all affect hormone metabolism and liver detox pathways. So it can set us up to not have our insulin working properly. Additionally, many of these are classified as obesogens, meaning these toxins alter the insulin, alter blood sugar directly. So that's more of the environmental toxins. And then often they sit in our fat cells. So we have this excess amount of these toxins in our system. Inflammation is a huge driver as well. Often if you have a high toxic load, your inflammation's going to be whether it's parasites, molds, just immune dysfunction, nutrient deficiency, something's causing the inflammation. They'll kick up cytokines, which can actually blunt or lower the insulin sensitivity in our bodies, mimicking insulin resistance. And then bacteria in our gut, if the gut, instead of being tight, is now leaky, these bacteria can actually secrete something called LPS, and that LPS that gets into the bloodstream will directly disrupt the insulin receptors. Then we've got our sleep. Sleep is crucial. Having healthy sleep patterns and circadian rhythm is going to help with our insulin sensitivity. It's going to help with the signaling. We know that shift workers often have higher insulin resistance than people that are not doing shift workers. Often it's, because of having flip-flop schedules and going back and forth. Many of them dabble in kind of both a traditional and shift worker schedule. But sleep loss reduces insulin sensitivity by 30% in just one night. So getting good sleep is crucial for having healthy insulin sensitivity. So how do you track this, right? How do you see where do you stand? So one, go off your symptoms. Are you hangry? Do you have belly fat? Do you have the dark skin around your knuckles or elbows or knees? But again, you can do testing. So we can look at fasting insulin. Fasting insulin, you're going to do coming out of a fast, at least 8 hours, and we want to see where you're at. We want fasting insulin below 5 functionally. And so if you're above 5, that is showing that it's elevated or on its way to being very elevated, and this is the early signs of insulin resistance. Your fasting glucose, so again, fasted, so 8 hours plus, we are looking for it to be basically 75 to 85, with 90 being the absolute cap of where fasting glucose goes. Fasting glucose is just a snapshot in time though. So it's going to change minute to minute depending on what's going on in your body, where if you look at hemoglobin A1C, which you often want to look at both, that's the average blood sugar over a 3-month span. So you want that basically between 5 and 5.4 is perfect. If you're low, it's showing that your blood sugar is getting on the low side. If it's high, showing your blood sugar is high, but you want that to be again 5 to 5.4. Then we want leptin. Ideally, you want this less than 10. So if you have high levels, we're showing that you have leptin resistance and again, metabolic inflexibility. Then we can do a CGM. So if you want to look at blood sugar, again, over a 24-hour span for about 2 weeks, you can get a CGM. I do love, there is one that just came out that we will link here that is $49 for 2 weeks. I don't have an affiliate with them. I just love it because continuous glucose monitors have always been on the pricier side. They used to be around $300 a month, but now this one's $49. And so you can see, how does your body do with specific foods? How does it do when you pair foods together, right? So if you have fruit and you pair it with almond butter, does it prevent a spike? What is your blood sugar doing while you're sleeping? And you can see all of these patterns, play around with your diet, see what works and what doesn't work with looking at data in real time. And you'll be able to see where your blood sugar is after certain things and use it as a little human experiment. So it's always fascinating. I'll hear people say, gosh, I just don't do well with, it'll be something. It'll be like butternut squash, raises my blood sugar, or, mushrooms, or there's always certain things that people learn through these that their blood sugar will react to. So it's a great little experiment. So what can you do to stabilize your blood sugar, to start to reverse some of these metabolic issues? The most important thing for most people is diet. It's eating a balanced diet 80 to 90% of the time. And when you do cheat, it's not going off the rails. What you want is a diet that is high in fats, high in protein, lots of color, lots of veggies, and complex carbs. So complex carbs are going to be a slower burn, right? They don't spike blood sugar. They're going to, slowly raise blood sugar. That would be things like sweet potatoes, butternut squash. Those guys are going to definitely help you not have these big spikes. If you do have something like rice, you want to pair it with a fat or a protein to help prevent the blood sugar spike. Something that is key is never drinking coffee on an empty stomach. Always drink coffee with your food. And you want the first thing you eat and the majority of your meal to be protein. That is probably the most important part of a meal, and we want protein. My rule of thumb on protein is you want to take your ideal body weight in pounds, and that's what you want roughly in grams of protein, about that 0.8 to grams to 1 gram per pound. So if you want to be 130 pounds, you want to eat roughly 130 grams of protein, and it will feel tough. It will feel like a lot, but this is the way to get full, stay full, and prevent really big blood sugar swings. Then if you're going to have carbs, you want fiber-rich carbs. So you want root veggies, squash, berries, leafy greens. They're definitely not going to spike your blood sugar quite like the simple carbs will. And then don't eat your carbs alone. So don't just go eat, trying to think even what a carb is alone. Don't just go eat strawberries or an apple. You want to eat it with a little bit of fat, almond butter, or a, piece of cheese. But, if you're someone that's not metabolically super healthy, avoid long fasts. You don't want to do crazy long fasts. Again, it's too stressful. You want to not skip meals. And as you get more metabolically healthy, you can go longer and longer without eating. But if you're someone that's not super metabolically healthy, don't try to dive into really long fasting. The next thing is build your muscle. And I know that sounds crazy, but your muscle is going to be where all that extra glucose is stored. So if you have no skeleton muscle, you're not going to have a storage unit for extra glucose. So what that means is it's turned into visceral fat. Visceral fat is fat around organs. It is the most dangerous type of fat we can have. So having adequate amounts of skeletal muscle is crucial for having storage places for the excess glucose, and it's going to help improve the glucose uptake of insulin. So it's definitely, I'd say, one of the most important things is food, and right behind that is have muscle. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to be a bodybuilder or, lifting crazy weights, but lift some weights, build some muscle. I want, strength training a few times a week. The next thing is not going overboard with cardio. Cardio, especially prolonged cardio, can really raise your blood glucose. So, doing maybe smaller walks, or if you are going to do something more intense, high intensity interval training where you get your heart rate up and then bring it right back down. That sustained cardio, running, cycling, where it goes up and it just stays high for a long time, that is going to, again, release cortisol after a while and can raise your blood glucose. So we want to look for things like walking, stretching, yoga, even high intensity interval training, but again, making sure your heart rate is dropping in between your sets of going again. Then we look at some supplements that help with blood sugar stability. You really want to work with someone if this is the case. Don't blindly listen to these supplements, but some of the supplements that are really helpful in terms of balancing blood sugar, the first would probably be berberine. It improves the insulin sensitivity and glucose uptake. It's basically the natural metformin. Berberine has been studied for many years. Very, very helpful. Then we have inositol. I like myo-inositol or D-chiroinositol, and this is really helpful for people that have insulin resistance or PCOS and want to improve their insulin sensitivity. Magnesium, this is crucial for cell signaling as a whole, but insulin signaling, and most people are deficient in magnesium. Magnesium glycinate is the best, kind of well-rounded form of magnesium. Then we have chromium, and that's going to support glucose metabolism. ALA, or alpha lipoic acid, helps the mitochondrial function and improves insulin sensitivity. And then adaptogens, ashwagandha, rhodiola, ginkgo, these are herbs that help the body respond to stress, can help the body if you're someone that is struggling with high stress and need your cortisol balance so that you're not, getting that elevated cortisol state. A few other things is if you are concerned about toxins, run a tox panel, make sure that there's no, of these obesogens in the system, plastics, metals, VOCs, pesticides. Check your body. You can run a tox panel for that. And really, add in daily detox. We have several podcasts on just daily detox tools that you can use to make your life, lowering toxins on a day-to-day basis. And then prioritize our sleep. You want to get 8 hours of sleep, of good interrupted sleep. We know that if you have a bad night of sleep, you generally eat more the next day. Insulin sensitivity drops. You want to work on your nervous system, lowering stress every day, whether that's vagus nerve, breath work, meditation, but find some ways to get your stress down and improve your vagal tone, the vagus nerve. So we went a little deep into blood sugar, but really I think the big takeaways are, yes, blood sugar dysregulation, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes can absolutely be food driven. For a lot of Americans, it is purely poor diet, sedentary lifestyle, but there's other factors, your thyroid, your hormones, your toxins, your gut inflammation, your gut microbiome, your stress, your sleep. There are so many factors that really can affect our blood sugar and need to be looked at. So if you're someone struggling with these symptoms, I encourage you to get a CGM, get that and start to track your blood sugar. Ask your doctor for some of those tests, and then start working on your diet, start working on lowering stress, start working on cleaning up your gut and allowing your body to heal so that you can get your metabolism better. These things, if you catch them early, are a lot easier to address, a lot easier to reverse than when they become big problems, whether it's type 2 diabetes or even some of the, scarier pathologies that can come from it. But, big things: prioritize protein, prioritize fat, walk after meals, reduce your toxic load, get good sleep, and then test your fasting insulin, your A1C, and your leptin, see where those guys are, and then go from there. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you next week.